So, a little reflection today for those whose reaction to the discovery of a significant other, a family member, a partner, someone that is very close to you who has come out as trans, and you've suddenly been introduced to this world you knew nothing about, this life you knew nothing about. A common reaction, I think, for many people is to say it's not natural. It's not something I relate to. It's not, let's say, the man I married, or the son or daughter I raised. And of course, logically, probably, you might be able to hopefully come to terms fairly soon with why that person didn't come out sooner, why they've kept this hidden, why it's been suppressed, and possibly even sympathize with the difficulties that likely will have presented for them if they're anything like most of us who've gone through that. It is a very, very difficult thing to know when and how to come out about. And of course, the longer things go on and the deeper relationships become, in many ways, very often it becomes even more difficult. And there's always going to be that fear factor, of course. What happens to my relationships? Might they be negatively impacted in some way by this revelation? So I think all of that is probably something that you might be able to work through logically and come to your own conclusions on. But still, probably for many people, there remains quite a deep inner feeling of unease. Even when you perhaps know how or have a sense of how life is changing. Is this person going to want to talk about this all the time, or keep on showing me photographs, or even perhaps some have expectations about, if you're sharing the same home space, dressing as well. And of course, you will have your own time and pace and reaction about how to respond to that. And important to let them know and for them to be respectful of how easy you feel about the level of exposure, as it were. You want to feel able to accommodate. Perhaps that's something you want to move fairly slowly with, or perhaps just to test out on one-off basis, as it were, if it's to do with dressing, for example. I still think there's something for many people that's going to be much more difficult to understand. A feeling quite deep in the gut, probably, of it may come across as kind of revulsion, but coming very much under this heading, it doesn't feel natural to me, kind of like an intuition. And I suspect that may be to do with the fact that we quite often confuse gender and sexual orientation. How is someone going to behave sexually? What is their sexual nature? And the two kind of do wrap up under the heading of sexuality, which has that association with, is it someone I identify with or not? Does this person have the same sexuality or opposite sexuality to me that I can mirror and complement? Where sexual activity and orientation is concerned, my sense is that probably there is a very natural human instinct about this. And for some, that means a repulsion or an unease, at least, around something that doesn't fit with their own sense of the way relationships should be. Of course, social conditioning can play quite a part in this, religious upbringing and so on. But here I'm talking about something almost primordial, perhaps. And if we were to look at traditional hunter-gatherer societies where there were very clearly defined roles, and for example, men were expected to go out, defend their villages, to hunt, to fight. Those that didn't both within their male companionship groups and also, I suspect, within their wider tribal societies, tended to be shunned. You're not playing your part if you are effeminate, if you're not able to pick up a spear and go and kill a rabbit, I think was the song, wasn't it? But not just kill a rabbit, kill other human beings as well, kill human beings perhaps. So something quite primordial there, maybe a hangover that continues for some of us, an idea around the parts people can play, but also I think exposure to what is we regard as normal. And when we suddenly see someone, so if I can talk about men specifically, a male crossdresser, you suddenly start, let's say as a girlfriend or as a wife or as a significant other, seeing this person that you love and thought you knew, I don't know, wearing makeup and dresses and goodness knows what else, and behaving in a way that you feel is unmanly. That's going to be quite a tall order for many to come to terms with, simply because it may seem abnormal, quite apart from all the concerns around the nature of the relationship and whether this is going to be an expectation that it's brought in, or there's some pressure from your partner to bring this into your wider life. I think this, for some people, may be down to a so-called implicit bias, and most of us seemingly do have prejudice that we're not aware of, wouldn't want to admit to, unconscious of, don't admit to ourselves. Certainly there have been some very, very extensive studies. There's a very famous one with several universities, I know Harvard is one of them, in the US, that have looked into this, how we react in very subtle ways very often to images of people who are not of our own ethnicity, for example, or our own gender, indeed. And it gets intensified when we see images of people who do not conform to our ideas of normality. I think this is really the nub of what probably is prompting that deep inner feeling, a lack of exposure to something, and then suddenly having this overwhelm of the senses. If someone wants to start showing you photographs, there's probably very few people out there like me with my kind of website doing transformations on Tuesday and so on. But if this is all suddenly new for a person that you thought you knew, and knew in a restricted way, as it were, in their one presentation, that's going to be quite hard to suddenly take on board. So I think, how do we normalize it? How do we become comfortable with it? One of the things is actually to be exposed to it, perhaps fairly gently. And that may be through seeing some photographs, through having some conversations, through exploring a bit in this community, seeing images of others. And I've done this with, I found I had an unconscious bias to people who have facial disfigurement, serious facial disfigurement some years ago. And I didn't like myself for discovering that. I noticed it when I was in London in a library, and there was someone there who had a very, very severe skin condition. I found myself really finding it hard to know how to hold my gaze. I had to interact with this person, and I came away ashamed of myself, really, for making a judgment. And one thing I did was I signed up for a Facebook group for people. There was a charity actually that supports people, and indeed is a voice for people who have facial disfigurement. And quite regularly then I was getting in my Facebook feed pictures and stories that really helped normalize what had been difficult for me to respond to. And I became much more sympathetic towards them and understanding, of course. And of course, logically, I knew that I should not be judging them. on the basis of how they looked. That was really a very cruel thing to do. So I do think exposure at a level you feel comfortable with may be a way to deal with this feeling if it does all feel unnatural. Just a reflection to offer, hopefully might be useful. Maybe it's something that resonates with you, maybe it doesn't.